So today, we are at the very start of a brand new series that I've entitled Life, Love, and Light. And it's based directly out of the book of 1 John, Life, Love, and Light. And the reason that I've called it that is because these are the three primary themes in the book of 1 John. How many of you have ever read the book of 1 John before in your lifetime? All right, about half. So this is good. Some of you are like, yeah, probably. At some point in my life, I might have read that one. So if you've read it, you'll notice that these are like the three primary core themes of the book of 1 John. In fact, life shows up 12 different times in 5 chapters. Love shows up. Anybody want to take a guess how many times? It's more than that. 27 times in 5 chapters, John talks about love. And then light is talked about between 5 and 7 times, depends on the translation that you used. But what John is trying to do, the author of 1 John, what he's trying to do is trying to help us learn to understand what it means to live consistently in the love and light of Jesus. Let me give you just a little bit of background on 1 John, because like I said, we're going to spend like the next 6-7 weeks in this book, and it's important for us to understand it. This book was written by a man named the Apostle John, right? John, the beloved of Jesus. He's one of the 12 disciples, and this is actually one of the newest books in the New Testament. Does that make sense? So you think about the New Testament being written somewhere around 2,000 years ago. Some of the earliest works started probably in like 40 to 45 AD. The book of 1 John was actually written in like 90 to 95 AD. It was part of the early Christian church. It was the only book in the Bible that is newer, right? Talking about old work, old Bible. The only book that is newer than 1 John, Revelation. Revelation being one of the last books that was written, actually the last book. And John wrote 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, Revelation, and John the Gospel. So this is what they call the Johannine letters, right? So you can go home to your family today and give them a little bit of quiz about theology. What did you learn in church today? Johannine letters. It means that John wrote the letters. Sounds pretty fancy. You can use it over coffee this coming week. What was happening, though, is that John was living in this region called Ephesus. It was a really important city in the Mesopotamian Rim at the time, and he was helping a bunch of different churches to try to live out their relationship with God in life and love and in light. And the Apostle Paul had actually helped to establish the churches in Ephesus. You remember this? I think it was last week, might have been the week before. And Acts chapter 20, where Paul met with the elders. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Met with the elders at Ephesus. And what was the warning he gave to those elders? Watch out for, somebody got it, false teachers. So Paul established the church in Ephesus somewhere in 55 AD. He starts the church in Ephesus, but then he warns them, hey, watch out for false teachers. So 40 years later, this is the biggest issue that John's dealing with in that very same church. They showed up in force. They showed up significantly in the life of the church in Ephesus. And here's the question. These false teachers, these people who were trying to pull the church away from the truth, the biggest issue they were facing is right here. Maybe getting electronics to work. That might be their biggest issue. Their biggest issue is this question: is believing in Jesus enough? Is believing in Jesus enough? Is it enough just to believe? And so what John does for these 5 chapters, I'll give you a quick outline. He gives an introduction, kind of sets the stage. Then he talks about what it means to walk in light. Then he talks about what it means to walk in love. And there's a closing. It's actually a letter. It looks a lot like a normal letter you would write. Because John is so burdened with the church and this question, right? the question of whether believing in Jesus is enough, he writes this very clear and very direct letter about what it means to not just believe in Jesus, but to walk with Jesus. Okay, I mentioned the false teachers just a couple minutes ago, people who had kind of stepped into the church and tried to pull the church away from the truth. How many of you have ever heard of the term docetism? You're getting all kinds of theology today. This will be great. Anybody heard of docetism? I won't put you on the spot. Okay, so this was one of the false teachings that was happening in the context of the church of Ephesus. And docetism is the belief that Jesus really wasn't human. He just looked human. He just kind of seemed human, but really no God would ever come in a human form. So the Docetists believe that we saw an image of God in the person of Jesus, but he wasn't actually human. And then Cerinthus believed, this is another false teaching, Cerinthus believed that Jesus was only human for a portion of the time. Did you know that? So Cerinthus believed that the Holy Spirit descended in the person of Jesus onto a man around the time that he was baptized, and then just before Jesus died, the Spirit left him. Because gods can't die, right? Gods would never give their lives for somebody else. There was all these kinds of false teaching, Docetism, Cerinthianism, Gnosticism. You probably heard of that one. Anybody heard of Gnosticism? Okay. So Gnosticism is, the goal of Gnosticism was to transcend the human condition, that everything was about the spiritual life. And so it didn't matter what happened in the physical as long as you spiritually felt connected. So whether it was Docetism, Cerinthianism, Gnosticism, they were all asking the same question. Is it okay just to believe in Jesus? Is it okay just to mentally ascend to the reality of the person of Jesus? Is that enough? And we're going to turn your Bibles, if you would, to 1 John chapter 1. We're going to spend just a little bit of time trying to answer this question this morning. And I want to set the stage for this entire series. Because you're going to see that question come up over and over and over again over the next 7 weeks. Is believing enough? There's this kind of concept in our culture right now that many of us, we bump into on a regular basis. Hey, you have your beliefs, I have mine. Your beliefs are fine, and so are mine. Your beliefs are as valid as my beliefs, right? We're in this kind of culture of tolerance, and I'm not against that, but the danger in equating all beliefs as equal is that reality is then you don't have to live differently just to believe something. I think it's an issue in our culture, and this is exactly what was happening in the context of the church of Ephesus as John was writing to these churches with that question, is belief enough? So 1 John chapter 1, let's read together. I'm reading from the NIV. You don't have to read out loud, but I will. It'll be on the screen, or you can grab your smartphones or pull out your paper Bibles if you still carry one of those. 1 John chapter 1, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes. Okay, stop for 1 second before I go any further. Remember, Docetism, Cerinthianism, Gnosticism, they were all trying to claim that Jesus wasn't actually fully human. And so do you pay attention to what the point John's trying to make in this moment, right? Notice how tactile John is in this moment, right? Notice how John's is trying to put something into words that will make you experience Jesus as more than just a belief and idea, okay? Watch for that. 1 John 1, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, right? Physically heard, which we have seen physically with our eyes, which we have looked at, our hands have even touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. You see the issue John's dealing with. Everybody's like, Jesus was just maybe a good teacher or a wonderful spirit, but he wasn't really the God-man who died and came back to life. This we proclaim concerning the word of life. He's trying to set the tone for for who Jesus really was. Verse 2, the life appeared. We have seen it, and we testify to it, and we proclaim to you the eternal life, which was with the Father and has appeared to us. There's that word again, like trying to get his readers to understand that they literally saw Jesus. They literally heard Jesus. They literally, it says, touched Jesus. They had breakfast with Jesus. How often have I wanted to do that in my lifetime? Breakfast is my favorite meal of the day. And I would love to sit and have breakfast with Jesus. And what John's saying, we did that. We really ate and talked and listened to and touched the real Jesus. Verse 3, we proclaim to you what we have seen and heard so that you also may have fellowship with us. And our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. We write this to you to make our joy complete. So he's saying like, hey, I'm just trying to give you the joy that we have in having a relationship with Jesus. I want to pass on that same knowledge, that understanding, that feel, that sight, that hearing of Jesus himself. I want you to have that. Verse 5, this is the message that we have heard from him and declare to you, God is light. There's one of those early references to the core issues of 1 John. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, what darkness is he referring to? False teaching, right? That Jesus wasn't really the God-man. If we claim to have fellowship with him, that being Jesus, and yet walk in darkness, we lie and we don't live out the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, purifies us from all sin. Okay, there's a direct connection here between the person and work of the actual living, breathing, talking Jesus and the forgiveness of sins. And these false teachers were saying, it doesn't really matter. So let's go back to our original question. According to 1 John 1, verses 1 through 7, is believing in Jesus enough? Is it enough to save you? Is it enough to keep you? Is it enough to sustain you? Just to have a belief, right? Okay, so I'll give an example. I believe that it is possible to jump out of an airplane and live. There's lots of people who jump out of airplanes. They've got parachutes on their back. Hopefully they packed it right. They get to the bottom and everything's fine. I absolutely believe it's possible to jump out of an airplane and live. I don't jump out of airplanes. I just don't. Partly because I have never been given the opportunity, but partly because jumping out of airplanes and living, it doesn't really matter. I believe it's possible. I've seen other people do it. I've watched videos of people jumping out of airplanes, getting to the bottom, and living. But is that enough? Does that mean that I've jumped out of an airplane? Does that mean I've had the experience of falling from the sky at whatever the constant velocity rate is? I don't know somebody know what that number is, right? 170 some odd miles per hour falling from the sky. No. What Paul is saying, what John is saying in 1 John, what he's trying to help us understand is that we can believe in something, but that something, just believing, doesn't actually change our lives. The fact that people can jump out of airplanes has no bearing on my everyday life. The fact that people do it probably every single day has no bearing on what I eat for breakfast or how I parent my kids or where I go on vacation. Right? The fact that I believe in the possibility of human flight that doesn't end in death does not mean that my life changes. John is trying desperately to get us to understand that this believing in Jesus is the beginning, but it's not the end. So I want to go back And I want to look at the number of times that John uses the term life in just the first couple of verses, okay? Can we go and watch for that, right? I'm going to go back to those first couple of verses. First one's right here in the very first verse. John's talking about that which was from the beginning, which we have seen and heard, we've seen with our eyes, we've looked at with our hands, we've touched, and this we proclaim concerning the word of life. Not the word of thinking, not the word of believing, not even the word of trusting, but the word of life. And then he goes on again. The life appeared. We have seen it and testified to it, and we proclaim to you the eternal life which was with the Father and has appeared to us. Okay, let's do a quick change. I want to go back and change these verses because I want to change one word. I'm going to call it the JAV, the Josh Adjusted Version of the Bible, okay? So don't accept this one as truth. Because what I sense John's trying to convince us of is that Jesus did not come just to change our beliefs. He came to change our lives. Jesus didn't just come to change the way we believe, but the way we live. So let's go back, and what if we just change the word life to belief, right? This we proclaim to you concerning the word of belief. Does that make sense? Go to the next one. The belief appeared, and we have seen it and testified to it, and we proclaim. This is the JAV, just so you know, Josh Adjusted Version. The belief appeared, we've seen it, testified to it, we proclaim to you the eternal belief, which was with the Father. Right? When we distill our relationship down, when we reduce down our relationship with Jesus to just something that we believe, what do we lose? We lose life. Because Jesus didn't just come to change the way we believe. He came to change the way we live. Don't trust this version, okay? If you see any of the JAV, it's not a legitimate version. But many of us, we do this. We reduce our relationship with Jesus down to a set of beliefs, and we just try to add Jesus to everything else that we're doing. Because we think that belief is enough. I'll put it a different way. More than just a way of believing, Jesus made known to us a way of life. Okay, so I'm just old enough, I don't know if I like to say this out loud, but I'm just old enough to remember a time where internet was not easily accessible to all the humans. Okay? Some of you under the age of 40 are like, what are you talking about right now? Like, I'm old enough to remember a time when the internet didn't exist for all people. I'm old enough to remember a time where only like the really, really important people had cell phones, right? And there were these bags. You remember those cell phones that some of you are like, this is the weirdest thing I've ever heard of, right? But they had a battery that was like the size of a car battery with a phone on top, and they walked around with it, right? But in that era of my life, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, that era of my life, we would stay out for all hours of the day. We would leave in the morning, and my dad would whistle, and we'd come home at night. And nobody questioned where we were, what we did, right? Like, my dad didn't have a watch on me so he could kind of check my GPS location, right? My neighbors all knew who I was. I grew up in an era where our world in many ways was safer, and our world in many ways was maybe even more ignorant to the dangers that lived around us. And in that era, okay, in that time frame, when I grew up in the 70s and 80s, a significant portion of the people who lived in the United States claimed to believe in Jesus, right? It was actually a majority. 60-some-odd% at that time, depending on the stats you look at, believed in Jesus. You might even be able to call us a Christian nation in the 70s and 80s because so many people believed in Jesus. But dear friends, can we fast forward now 46 years later, and can we just deal with the reality that at most recent polls, significantly less than 50% of the people in the United States consider themselves Christians, right? We're kind of in a post-Christian nation. And when when I was growing up, everybody had kind of a similar moral value, right? When I was growing up, everybody had a similar belief that certain things were right and certain things were wrong just because they were, right? There was this pretty clear right and wrong. I'm trying to teach my kids the difference between right and wrong in a world that does not really believe that right and wrong exists any longer. And so I'm just old enough to know that there was a period of time in our country, in our world, that our everyday lives kind of, by and large, had a rightness and a wrongness to them, and by and large kind of looked a bit like Jesus. But here we are, 4 decades later, and very few people claim to be followers of Christ in our country. Very few people have claimed to have the same moral values, right? And so, in many ways, right is no longer right, and wrong is no longer wrong. And so merely just believing in Jesus without living differently, what I'm trying to explain to you is that in this day and age, in this culture, to just believe in Jesus in a way that doesn't change the way we live, we're just kind of sitting ducks in a world that no longer believes that right is right and wrong is wrong. And we can fight over that. We can get frustrated by it. We can kind of put our time and money and energy, into electing the right people that will bring back the morals to our country. And maybe that'll work, or maybe it just starts with you and I living differently. Maybe the change starts with us not just believing differently, but behaving differently. And this is what I believe that John is trying to convince the people of Ephesus. He's trying to say that belief is not enough. That just merely believing in Jesus is not enough. So here's a little bit more kind of unpacking of what John's trying to say, right? He says, the life has come, and we have discovered that life. We've seen that life. We've held hands with that life. We've eaten breakfast with that life, that being Jesus. Not just the belief, but the life of Jesus. And then he says, notice the rest of the way that he describes their relationship, his relationship with Jesus. We've proclaimed to you what we've seen and heard so that you may have fellowship. Do you fellowship with your beliefs? Seriously. Do you just sit in a room and be like, okay, I'm going to have my belief in people flying out of an airplane and my belief in Jesus. We're going to have a coffee together this morning. Right? The things we don't fellowship with belief. We fellowship with relationships, with people, with tangible individuals, right? So John's saying, so that you may also have fellowship with us, and our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ. Not our belief. Use the JAV version again, right? So that you may have belief with us, right? John's not writing so that we'll just believe. Not just so that we'll believe in the Father and the Son. All that's important, but he's talking about the living out. The believing that leads to behaving like Jesus. The change of life, not just the change of beliefs. Verse 5, this is the message we've heard from him and declared to you. They're saying, please understand this is a direct reference to what Jesus said and did. This is an eyewitness account that God is light and in him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship, there's that word again. If we claim to have a relationship with Jesus and yet believe in the darkness. No. It's not a belief in the darkness. It's a walking in the darkness. Right? These are behaviors. These are ways of living life. Then we lie and we live out the truth. But if we walk in the light, not believe in the light. Notice he doesn't say, if we believe in the light as he is in the light, then we have fellowship with one another. No, it's if we walk in the light as he is in the light. We have fellowship with one another. And the blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, purifies us from all sin. Here's the reality. In one way or another, we are all being discipled. It's the truth. In one way or another, we are all being discipled. I read a statistic recently that the average human in any given day experiences something like 3,000 different commercial messages in a given day that are trying to get you to buy something or be something or go somewhere. It's like north of 3,000 messages per day that you receive in some way, shape, or form, targeting you to get you to do something, to buy something, to believe something, to behave a certain way. You see, the reality is, all day, every day, someone or something is discipling us. So what is discipling? What is our primary form of discipleship? Is it getting ahead? Is it raising good kids? Is it saving for the future? John understood very clearly that Jesus came not just to change our beliefs, but to change our way of life. And really, discipleship is about a way of life. It's a way of behaving. It's a way of living day in and day out. And whether we know this or not, whether we want to believe this or not, we're all heading towards something. We're all being discipled by something. We're all striving for something. We're all trying to become something, or perhaps not become something. It's in the way that we talk and dress and walk. It's in the way that we buy or don't buy. It's what we say yes to and what we say no to. It's how we spend our time and our energy and our money. It's what we think about. That, dear friends, is at the core of what it means to be discipled, right? Like, we're all being discipled by something in one way or another. And so, as we start this series, as we spend time in 1 John, I think what John is trying to do, he's trying to hold a mirror up to our souls and ask the question, what is discipling you? Who is discipling you? What's the trajectory of your life? Not just what do you believe, but what do your behaviors say about what matters most to you? Okay, so I have a follow-up question. I just talked to you about kind of what my life was like 40 years ago growing up, what our country was like in the 70s and 80s. And I have a follow-up question. What would you say is the greatest threat to Christianity in our country today? You don't have to put your hands up. But what popped in your head? What do you think is the greatest threat to Christianity in our country? Is it consumerism? Is it liberal ideologies? Is it hedonism? Is it self-medication? We're dealing with this huge opioid crisis, right? What do you think is the greatest threat to Christianity in our country today? My answer? I don't know where that came from. My answer is what I'll call functional hedonism. Functional atheism, sorry. And I want to define this, right? I don't think the biggest issue that we face in our country, I don't think it's liberal ideology or consumerism or hedonism or self-medication. All those are really awful things that are plaguing our culture right now. But I think our biggest struggle is functional atheism, and that is believing in the person and work of Jesus, but living as if he does not exist. You see, the problem is, I think the issue in the context of our culture and our everyday lives isn't that we don't necessarily believe in Jesus, but that our belief in Jesus doesn't change the way that we live. And if our belief in Jesus doesn't change the way that we live, why would anybody else want to follow Jesus? Why did anybody else want to believe in Jesus? Functional atheism is this concept that I think John struggled with, and I think a couple thousand years later we're still struggling with. Believing that Jesus exists or existed, believing that Jesus died and rose from again, right? But that it doesn't change the way we live our everyday lives. And what I think John's trying to do in response to this functional atheism, he's trying to create in us a culture of discipleship. A culture of discipleship. The term culture I'll describe it for you. A culture is shared everyday habits, things that we all do together, right? We all get up in the morning, most of us, unless you work the night shift. And we all typically brush our teeth and take a shower. And we all typically put on our work clothes, and we all typically go to work. Or we put on our parenting clothes if we're stay-at-home parents. But we've got some of these shared behaviors, right? We've got some of these things that we've created as a culture. What John's trying to do throughout the book of 1 John, he's trying to give us shared everyday habits that would lead us to become more like Jesus. And so the question is, in our everyday lives, in our coming and our going, are we living more as functional atheists? Or are we leaning more into a culture of discipleship? Do we have shared behaviors and habits that lead us to become more like Jesus? Or do we just believe in Jesus and not change anything else about the way we live? This was the greatest danger that John was facing a couple thousand years ago in the context of the church. And here we are, 1,926 years later. And we're still facing some of the very same problems. Is it enough to just merely believe in Jesus? Or should that belief change the way we live, the way we think, the way we act, the way we talk, the way we spend our money, where we go on vacation, how we raise our kids, how we treat our spouses, how we interact with our neighbors? Dear friends, our world is desperate for a culture of discipleship right now. They need to see that not only do we believe in Jesus, but that we live like Jesus. I want to close this morning with a story. I had a friend of mine, he told me about this dream he once had. In this dream, he actually dreamed he was like on a beach somewhere, or maybe it was in the middle of the desert, but surrounded by sand. And in that dream, there was not just one line. We've always talked about drawing a line in the sand, right? We know that culturally that means like we're taking a big leap, a step. But in this dream, he didn't just have one line in the sand, he had three. There were 3 lines in the sand. And he felt like God was kind of impressing upon his heart that, like, so often we think that following Jesus just means to go from unbelief to belief, right? That's the big line in the sand. Do we believe in Jesus or not, right? But in this dream, what God was revealing to my friend was this idea that there's more than just one line in the sand when it comes to following Jesus. That there's actually 3 lines in the sand. Right? The first one we all know about, right? Many of us think that to follow Jesus, we have to go from unbelief to belief. We don't believe that Jesus exists. We don't believe that Jesus loves us. We don't believe that Jesus died. We don't believe that he rose from the dead. We don't believe that he's the only way to heaven, and that in order to have a relationship with God, that we just step that one line from unbelief to belief in God. But the problem is, so often, right, that is the first step in following Jesus, but so often we get stuck here. We stay here. And let me tell you that the thinking behind this first step, right? When we go from unbelief, not believing in Jesus at all, to believing in Jesus, the primary question we ask is, what can I get out of my relationship with God? What can God do for me, right? That's one of the first things that we ask when we decide to follow Jesus is like, well, what can God give me that I don't have? What can God do for me that I can't do for myself? That's a very natural starting point for a relationship with Jesus. From unbelief to belief, it starts with the question, why do I need God? What does it matter that I have God in my life or not? And so many people think that is the line in the sand when it comes to following Jesus. But can I tell you, I think it's only one of 3 lines in the sand. Because the first one starts from unbelief to belief, but then there's another line in the sand that I'm going to call the line of dependence, right? We go from questioning, okay, what can God do for me? But then we begin to, in our relationship with Jesus, we begin to depend on God, right? And the question that we're asking here is, what can I comfortably give back to God without a lot of sacrifice? This is kind of like, after we've been walking with Jesus for a while, after we've received forgiveness of sins, after we've recognized that Jesus actually does love us, right? After we've moved from unbelief to belief, then we start kind of testing our relationship with God. Like, okay, God, I guess there's some things you want from me. Maybe I should start giving in the offering. Maybe I should start reading my Bible. Maybe I should start praying, right? Maybe I should start behaving a little bit like Jesus, since I believe in Jesus. And so this is kind of the next step of discipleship, to go from a belief in God to a dependence on God. And most of the time we're saying, okay, what are the things that we can give to God in our lives that don't really have a whole lot of change that requires of us, but then we start trusting God more. And that is a step of faith, and it's an important one. But then there's one more line that all of us have to ask the question, are we willing to cross the line, not from unbelief to belief, which we've already done, but from belief to dependence on God, but then from dependence to surrender? These are the lines of discipleship, of following Jesus, that takes us from just believing in Jesus to living like Jesus. And when we get to the place where we cross that line of surrender to God, you know what happens? We begin to ask the question, what can I give out of my life to God more and more each day? What can I turn over to God? What part of my relationships can I give to God? What part of my finances can I give to God? What part of my worry can I give to God? What part of my doubt can I give to God? What part of my fear? What part of my insecurity? What part of my future am I willing to give to God? This is the journey of discipleship. Moving from unbelief to belief, from belief to dependence, and from dependence to surrender. And so can I ask all of us a question? As we enter into this series together, where would you put yourself on this chart in your own walk with God right now? You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell anybody you're with. But would you just pick a dot somewhere on this continuum? And would you maybe put it in your phone, write it in your Bible, write it down on your bulletin? Because moving from a belief in Jesus to behaving like Jesus starts with knowing where we're at right now. So here's my question. Where are you in this continuum in a relationship with God? And here's my second question. Which way would you put the arrow? What way are you trending, right? Are you trending from unbelief, but leaning towards okay, maybe Jesus really was the Son of God? Or are you in this kind of belief category, but you're really there's some doubts and struggles that you're really wondering, does Jesus actually exist? Does he really love me? Because discipleship is both about a point and a progress, right? Where we are at any given moment and which direction we are heading. My hope through this series is that the Holy Spirit will lead you and I to greater and greater levels of surrender as we walk through the First John, as we learn what it means to live in love and in light with Jesus. Because more than just a way of believing, Jesus came and made known to us a way of life. A way of life. So here's my closing question for all of us. Who or what is discipling you? Based on how you spend your time and your money and your energy, based on how your mind is focused, based on how you interact in your relationships, who or what is discipling you? Is it love, and is it life, and is it light? Is it becoming more like Jesus? Because Jesus came not just to change the way we believe, but the way we live.